It's Delaware for Thursday, June 27th. I'm Peter MacArthur. You know how we do it by now. Every now and again, we'd like to keep you up to speed on what's happening in the workplace. And no better resource to turn to here in Delaware than Chris Burkhard, Placer Staffing in Newark. Chris, good morning. How are you, sir?
Hey, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy it so much.
Yeah, me as well. And we always have some really solid topics to discuss, and today is no exception here. Why don't we start with this? The current business environment of higher interest rates. Are we seeing that, Chris, start to impact jobs in any way?
So it amazes me, but the economy keeps humming right along, and it doesn't appear to be heavily impacting job numbers. In fact, Pete, May's job report came in what I would call hot or strong, at 272,000 jobs. That's significantly more than an average we've had, say, over the last year and a half. And April was 165,000 jobs. I kind of think it's an environment that reminds me of the movie Everything All at Once, or the saying Everything All at Once, because jobs, online postings are down. Consumer sentiment seems to go up and down. Economic indicators go up and down. Yet unemployment is at 4%, which is historically incredibly low over the last 50 years. One note, it seems as if those in the age group of 20 to 24 are having a hard time getting jobs. Their unemployment is at 7.9%. That was a surprise to me as I was digging into this. But I hear that's supported with, it's harder to get interns. It's harder for recent college grads to get that first gig today. Not impossible, but harder.
Yeah. What about here in Delaware? Any specific conditions that are unfolding along these lines?
Well, you know, Delaware's doing a little bit better than the national average, where unemployment is at 3.9%. And there's been the job growth has been in government at a local level, health services, and education. Now, there's been some decline in the professional and business services, which I think is banking and finance and service. And my industry is down a little bit as well, which doesn't surprise me, is our industry boomed post-pandemic and actually has had kind of a soft last year. What is interesting is each county of Delaware does have slightly higher unemployment than last year at this time, but it's still what I would, my layman's perspective, it's still record low numbers.
Let me ask you this, and this is kind of on behalf of job seekers, because I think protocol and decorum is important here. But let me put it to you this way. If I go for an interview these days, right, is it still appropriate to send a thank you note, or is that kind of old school in the past?
You know what? I guess I am old school because I give it a resounding yes.
Yeah.
I think to stand out in the crowd, you have to make a difference. Now, maybe we compromise, and today it can be an email. I mean, the world, it just goes at such a pace. Maybe you don't have time to do a thank you note, put a stamp on it, and get it there before a decision is made. Although I'm hearing it's taking longer, so maybe old school wins. But there are a couple things. It's so rare that it happens that it's handwritten. Why not do it and compete? And then the other thing is personalize each note. There's some funny stories, Pete, where people send the same thank you note to 5 people. Well, we do talk. We do compare notes. Take the time to think a little bit about, maybe what was unique to each interview, and then put something there. And then ask for the job. It seems so obvious. Hey, I'm here interviewing. Why don't it's assumed you want it. But truth is, asking for the job is really important, and that's a great way to do it.
Well, here's the other thing. You talk about kind of the form letter thank you. That could also lead you into a kind of a lazy path of you send Nancy a thank you note with Jim's name on it, and that's not a good look.
And Nancy and Jim not only talk, but it does happen.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times that stuff gets back into the file for that interview experience, and there's debriefs about you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but, it is a thoughtful thing just to thank people for their time and let them know something specific that was great about the time. It's actually just being a good person, too, let alone whether you want the job. And that pays off in the long run.
Yeah, and most certainly. What are, Chris, the hardest professions we're seeing right now for businesses to find talent for today?
Gosh, Pete, this is the $1 million question, and my team spends a lot of time on this. And, nothing seems to stay in equilibrium for long when it comes to talent and jobs. For me, I've been around long enough that, believe it or not, there were times where there were too many teachers or too many nurses.
Yeah.
Flash forward to 2024, that's certainly not the case. But this might be a surprise to the audience. Accounting and finance is, if not the hardest, right up there with the hardest. There are less young people getting into the profession. It's a 5-year college degree. A lot of talk of reforming it to 4. Cost of education, time, all those things. The hours can be long and seasonal if you're in private accounting. And it's, considered a career where you're not going to maximize your money. Don't get me wrong, you're paid well. And then there's a lot of retirement. So there is a tremendous talent shortage. And at Placers, it is by far the most popular conversation that we see. The other is more mainstream and talked about. It's got a good story, and that's skilled labor, whether you're a welder or electrician or plumber thing. But Delaware's really doing a lot about it. The organizations are doing a lot about it with trade schools and apprentices and company programs. But the average age of construction workers is in the 50s. But what's neat, recently, there's a lot more interest from new career professionals in the field. You don't end up with a whole lot of student loans. You can make a really good living and have a pretty good quality of life.
Yeah, well, we see these rising college prices, tuition, room, board, all that stuff going up. And, you've seen the lists of comparing that and the debt you walk away from college with to the 18-month apprenticeship done deal, and then you come out, if you're lucky, making $60,000 to start in it as a plumber or an electrician or what have you. So you can certainly see where the math adds up on that side of things sometimes. Chris, we spend a lot of time, as we should, talking about the potential employee, right? But for hiring managers that are listening right now, what advice do you kind of push their way for the way things are?
Well, I think it's a very confusing environment for hiring managers. On one camp, there's this thought that, we're back to normal, so there should be a lot of talent. On the other side, I hear folks talk about, well, we're still in that environment where there's 10 jobs for every one person. I think what I see is organizations just need to get very clear with what they need in their hiring, from skills and competencies and culture. And that stuff kind of gets old or stale pretty quickly. Yeah. So getting very clear with what you want. I still think if you have you have to have really good hiring processes, Pete. And right now, one of the trends that's happening is that the time it takes to evaluate someone and get them hired seems to be stretching. It's gone from, say, 32 days to almost 45 days. So if an organization can close that, they can get the best talent. We do hear folks are losing talent because it just takes so long.
Yeah, people can't sit around if they're unemployed, especially. But you can also understand the challenge on behalf of hiring managers, Chris, in that you have a changing jobs landscape, and they have to now potentially kind of change the foundational way they've gone about hiring people to meet what is that new landscape. And that's not easy, obviously. You're kind of in some ways starting from scratch and having to really evaluate, as you made mention to, what the job market is and who the people are looking for positions right now.
Well, and I think hopefully hiring managers don't take offense. This is a sideline extra for them. Most of them have another skill or technical aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So I think organizations in general that have focus on good hiring practices and procedures make it easier for those hiring managers. And you are right. Unfortunately, we are a society that is attracted to headlines. So if I read in the business paper today that it's easier to hire or harder to hire, I think I kind of take that to work.
Yeah.
And I just always say, know yourself as a business, tell a good story, treat people fairly, but realize it is competitive for talent. Supply and demand, I'm not sure it's ever going to get back to where the employer can just have the pick of everyone. It's a very tight supply and demand, and I think it's going to stay that way for quite some time.
Yeah, it's certainly not boring. There's plenty to evaluate the way things are standing right now. Chris, as always, appreciate your time, appreciate the info, and you and I shall chat not far down the road.
I'll see you in a few.
Okay, sounds good. Chris Burkhard, Placers Staffing in Newark, joining us here on Delaware.